it interesting, and I'll go right back to you, Alexander, isn't it interesting that actually privacy of personal information is in fact impacted by massive surveillance and the pretense of, I don't want to say total pretense, but in the name of national security. So I'm just going to leave that there, and I'm going to come back to all of you. Give me 2 words for the current state of cloud service. I'll start. Hot mess. Alexander, what do you think?
Blurry responsibilities and no accountability, I think.
No accountability. Yeah. Hot mess. Don.
Any disclaimers.
Stuff.
Far west.
And Claudio, 2 words.
Unfortunate compromise.
Okay, so Alexandra, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to jump back on what Christophe was saying, which is quite interesting about the data collection. Because when the Snowden story appeared, you know, the data collection was also about mobile data and the metadata about it. And there was not yet as much data in the cloud side of things. And when people should realize that the only protection of our data on a third-party place is now the laws and regulation. Because when we add the data in-house, we will control the boundaries. We will decide, you know, depending on the ability, the skill set, and the let's say, the great posture, the security posture of an organization that will define how far the data could go. But now it's a total different shift because the control, again, moved on a third party. So why do we expect, we have expectation moving the data to a third-party platform, and we expect them to handle it with care, the due care concept.
We have no control.
No,
right?
and the regulation about the Europe, you know, agreement of the data transfer between Europe and US is what permit the cloud provider to process the data, take it and move it and build intelligence on it. And now, more than ever, it's so much a bigger issue. I mean, the bigger amount of data we place in cloud, the bigger the regulation is controlling. And sadly, we nowadays, I mean, today, I don't know, like 90%, I mean, of the key data is going in the cloud now. So that's my take. I don't have any numbers to align that, but it means that as a user, as a data owner, we may own it, but we don't control it.
Absolutely.
And the only control is the regulation, because what happened in the back end, you have no idea. And you know, third-party audit, fine, but what matters is the law. And I've been speaking with big organizations, like the big 5 privacy people in charge, like the director of privacy of Big Tech 1, Big Tech 2. And their work today is to make sure that the organization does business. It's not to comply and protect the data, it's to make sure that they can take the data and use it without being caught or without being stopped by the law and regulation. So you have lobbyists on the side, making sure that there is bottleneck in the law or bypass or workarounds. And that's the issue I have now with the cloud, is that data, people don't see it as this, but this is a full takeover of the world intelligence in data. So that's what we should think about. That was
the catch me if you can game. And I'm gonna go over to Claudio. Talk to us, Claudio, about surveillance and complacency. What's going on?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with mass psychology and the exploitation thereof, which we see in practically every other part of society. We know, or we've known for the better part of the last decade, that surveillance is pervasive. It's ongoing, and apparently it's unstoppable, and apparently we shouldn't oppose it. So we keep seeing those pictures of blimps over data centers, and the fact that there's a lot of international agreements towards data sharing, and we keep hearing this, and this is a bit of a trigger for me, this relentless and recurring idea that encryption necessarily has to have a backdoor for law enforcement reasons, and law enforcement cannot operate, or they can't do their jobs unless there are backdoors and everything. That hasn't worked so well for Australia, and that is a case that continues to be made time and time again, but it's a broken argument because you can't tear the fabric of today's modern economy, not to mention the trust that security has to have in technology, in order to make a case that you're working on something and you really want to make it easier on yourself. That just doesn't work, because if you create a backdoor into a system, you can expect that backdoor to be exploited by the bad guys as much as the good guys. So there's any number of arguments along those lines, but fundamentally, the idea that we can't function without surveillance is a bit of a trigger for me, having grown up in an Eastern Bloc country, where I remember one day when we got this typewriter that we borrowed from someone, and I wasn't allowed to use it. And the reason I wasn't allowed to use it is because if I were to type something and throw it out the window, someone would recognize exactly which typewriter was used to type that piece of paper, and someone from our family would be called in for questioning. And so there's this whole idea that neighbors are supposed to snoop on us and so on. And that's just reminiscent of the slippery slope that can exist when surveillance is mixed in with the rest of the fabric of society. So, cloud notwithstanding, that's my bit about surveillance.
So we go back to keeping the data in-house, or do we have any hope that actually privacy laws are going to eventually catch up, but not just catch up, but push for some innovation in the space where actually we're going to reclaim our dignity and our right to self-determination in the cloud? Who wants to comment on that?
Just two words. I just wanted to say 2 words as just before Don jumps in. I just wanted to say that there is, and it's fair for us to make a distinction between private clouds and public cloud.
Right.
Don?
Right.
Yeah, actually, I was going to mention that same point. There's cloud and there's cloud, lots of, for example, banks, they use private clouds and have complete control over what's going on, and from what I can see, do a pretty good job. The issue that I see that keeps us from, as you put it, reclaiming our control over privacy really has to do with private contracting and the availability of cloud services under specific terms and conditions. So if you go take a look at, I guess the best example would be in the GDPR, which is very prescriptive about responsibility for what happens with personal information that is collected. If you're using cloud, you understand that you're responsible. Yeah, if you're in Europe or Canada, you understand that you're responsible for the information. Then you go to your cloud provider and you say, we're going to be making a contract with you to store our information. We're responsible for what happens with it, but we need to get some assurances from you. And so the cloud provider, without mentioning any names, but its initials are, let's say, AWS, says, look, we don't know what you've got. We don't want to know what you're storing with us. We're a warehouseman. We're happy to receive your data. And by the way, we're going to move your data around from warehouse to warehouse.
So you'll never know how many copies we have and where it is, and it's exactly all very well protected.
But if you look at our contract for storing anything, for providing this cloud service, you'll see that we have disclaimed responsibility for virtually everything. And to the extent that we are responsible for anything, there's a limitation of liability in our contracts that it says that we're only liable to the extent of name some paltry sum. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
100,000 could be $1 million. It doesn't matter. Whatever you negotiate, it's not enough.
Yeah.
And you can actually sympathize with the cloud providers that way. They go, you know, we're not responsible for it in a primary sense. We're going to do our best. We're ISO 27001 compliant. We have a tier 3 data center. We you know, you can look at our SOC 2 certificate
and the
anytime
ISO
you like.
27018 and so many.
All of that stuff. And you know, we've got man traps and dogs and all kinds of things keep people out. So we're doing our best. What else can we do? And then of course the person responsible for the data and puts it with Amazon, or for example, really is at risk for the differences. And Amazon would say, rightly so. The law says you're responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
You've decided to put it with us. Give me a break.
And I want to get Alexander to take it right from there, because that is my pet peeve, where you put it with us, you're responsible, here's the terms of the contract, but we give you absolutely no tools to be responsible and accountable for your data once you've given it to us. Alexander.
Yes, that's a good point. And I want to just come back on what Don said about, you know, what you can get back in case of an incident. Like most of terms and conditions state that basically you can get what you paid for. Like what you spend in a month, you're gonna have like at the worst case you can have 1 month back. so when you, and if you think about companies that do you know, research and development, and they've got credit, like tax credit to develop their stuff, and the amount they get, that's just giving an idea of the value of the data, and that's far higher than a monthly subscription of the cost, even if it can be extremely expensive, it's always above. And then, as you said, you know, how can we know for a fact what's happening behind? I mean, paperwork is one thing, and we saw that the contract, Don just explained that the contract tells you that, okay, we can do the best, but we cannot guarantee anything in the end. And on the top of that, from a technical standpoint, we cannot verify anything. We can't. We just have to blindly trust a nice, cute interface with button on it, and you have no idea what happens behind. And I'm saying that technically, from a cloud provider standpoint, there is no way you will see that I will copy the data and abuse it. And one of my key stuff, let's say, you know, you apply the best practice and you say your system is up to date and patch and stuff. If I had to take it, because you did the best practice, I will take some snapshot of your systems. You will not see it because you do not control the back end. And I will keep it until there is a new super vulnerability coming in, giving full access to bypass the encryption and everything. And once this is happening, I will have all the data from the snapshot. I would get into it because you may have patched what you think you have patched, but the copy I have, you didn't patch it because you don't know I have it. And one of the basic control in cybersecurity is that you cannot protect what you do not know you have. And my issue with the cloud is that you don't know what you have because you have no idea. In terms of conditions, like I think Christophe or Don explained it, it says for the purpose of providing the service, you grant us the right to move the data around as needed. And you grant, actually, it's written in a way that you grant us a license, a perpetual license on that. And when you think about that, I mean, the lawyer is better equipped than myself to speak about that, but a permanent license, unrevocable license to process the data, that's a scary thing. So yeah, speaking about, yes.
Yeah, let's even look at the Google Analytics. The terms and conditions in that is, as soon as you are using our service, you are liable for everything and you no longer have control over what's happening.
Yes, and people don't get the correlation, the power of correlation, because you think analytics is nothing. It's like the single sign-on. You know, you have this website, sign on with Facebook, sign on with Google. Well, each time someone loads that page, it's calling a service at Google. So you are being tracked, even if you do not use the service. And because they collect all the data for so many free services, you are tracked like, I think, 100% of you, and we know who you are, where you go, what you do, what you browse, what you use, what you don't use. And the risk is that we see a big consolidation in a monoculture of, like, let's say, 5 big players that have the full visibility, and these players are all US based. And I mean, I was French, so when the Snowden story came out, as Christophe was saying, I saw it from the French side of things, and you know, French are very like privacy focused as well, and open source guy, and they like to control their stuff. And I was shocked, and I say, okay, no, that cannot happen. So we were speaking about solution for the cloud, and I'm going to just quickly speak about that, like homomorphic encryption coming, which means that you run an encrypted system in the cloud and the data run encrypted. Sadly, all the current homomorphic encryption just got hacked. So it's not working. And that thing is called confidential computing. You're going to see that. I think some cloud provider claim they have it, confidential computing right now. But it's bringing even more blur and fog in the cloud term, because as Don and Christophe or Claudio was saying, there is private cloud where the whole infrastructure is dedicated to you and no one else get into it. And there is the public cloud. And what they call confidential computing is supposed to happen on the public cloud for cost saving, you know, scalability and all. But that doesn't work because technically you cannot avoid that thing. So the only way right now that I see coming on the market, some offers coming, it's encrypting before the data reach the dangerous cloud. Now, convenience and privacy and all of that. You use Office 365, let's say, and you like all these features, reminder, translation. And when you're speaking into the team stuff, there's live translation happening. But for that to happen, that means that the platform must read the data and process it. So the license grant the use. So that means that if you encrypt it before it goes, you cannot have the service. So there is a trade-off. And
yeah, how is the world going to function? And yes. I want to go to Christophe and I want to ask him, are we becoming cloud complacent? Are we completely overwhelmed with all the technicalities and we're just saying, you know what, we need to get down to business. We need to put our stuff in the cloud. What happened during the pandemic, at least in Canada, we had the service offered by the government called Digital Main Street. And who do you think offered free services there? Some known cloud providers. So Christophe, what do you think is going on with complacency?
I think that's a great question. And I think you have to make a distinction between, you know, businesses and the private individual here. And, you know, of course, businesses, they're probably less complacent and they know they have regulations they have to abide by. So they're trying to do that, I guess, or they look at it from a risk perspective, you know, saying, okay, this is the risk. This is what we could be fined if we are not doing things properly, but we'll take the risk, and it becomes like an expense that you're gonna just, you know, provision for.
So Christophe, sorry, do you think that the people who take the risk, do you think they actually know what the risk is, what they're taking?
Well, I mean, if you look at organizations and businesses and corporations, depending on the size we're talking about, maybe not for small and medium enterprises, but like for big businesses, I guess they know, or at least they should know, and they have like good lawyers to help them with that, and internal legal services as well. When it comes to small and medium enterprises, it's probably a different story. It's much more difficult for them to understand and catch up with, you know, what the law is, you know, what regulations apply to them, especially in the realm of privacy. But to go back to the complacency and convenience of things, if you look at things from an individual perspective, all this is far too complicated and technical, yeah. and of course nobody is going to read the terms, you know, and you just want to be able to do your business. You just want to be able to work or chat, live in this digital world. So yeah, you click on the button, you agree, you accept the terms, because if you start reading them there, well, you need to dedicate a whole day to that, and you won't understand half of it, and I'm being generous. So you just click, and this is where, and maybe we can talk about that later on as well. I think it is not up to the people, the individual, or even the organizations to do this work. It is up on the providers of cloud services to do it. And I think with the GDPR and other privacy regulations popping up throughout the world, in the US, with in California, Virginia, in Canada, we're seeing a revamp of the privacy laws here, in India, and everywhere around the world. There's obviously a trend, a move, and I think it opens up an opportunity for a business opportunity. I just want to quote like a benchmark what was made by Cisco in 2020. It says like $100 invested in data privacy compliance program sets you $270 on average. So that's a nice return for being compliant. So it's not just a risk and compliance issue anymore. It's a business opportunity. And this, brings me to the point I wanted to make. This opportunity. There's a market for regulatory technology, and it's referred to as, the RegTech market, let's say. Mm-hmm. It was approximately $5 billion in 2019, and several studies are suggesting that this market is going to reach between 33 billion and 55 billion by 2025, 2026. This is an opportunity. So for all this, and actually, I think it's creating a whole ecosystem of startups, privacy startups, that are actually, trying to embed privacy right from the start. And this is actually a requirement when you look at it from a GDPR perspective, which requires, those who create, services and products to embed privacy. It's called data privacy by design into their products and services. And yeah, I think we still have a long way to go. And I think it was the Wild West before. And it's always like that. It starts with, new technology brings, many opportunities. Everybody jumps on it. And then after a while, we realize the impact it can have on society and ethics and that these kind of things.
So I'm really glad you've pushed the conversation into that. Actually, privacy can be and will be, because I don't see a way out, can be a catalyst for actually good innovation. And Claudio and I have been talking to a lot of third-party suppliers, and funny enough, there's a document that just circulated on LinkedIn from the Danish Data Protection Authority about the fact that controllers, so the companies that are engaging third-party SaaS providers, we actually need to vet their third parties, because we cannot rely on the immediate third party to actually do their due diligence. There are some sectors that I think would benefit a lot from what Christophe was saying, starting right with privacy by design from the get-go, especially if they're being offered to vulnerable sectors. And Claudio, I think we should have a little chat about that on that topic.